Starfield, the latest game to come out of Bethesda, is set to launch in September 9th, I believe, which is about 2 or so weeks away as of this recording. This game is promising us a whole lot, but does Bethesda have the greatest track when it comes to fulfilling their own promises?
And it's our biggest one yet. It is 4 times the size of Fallout 4. And this time it features all new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology. It allows us to have 16 times the detail and even view distant weather systems across the map. I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs. All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
Now make no mistake, Starfield is incredibly hyped and is much anticipated. We have numbers to back this up. In fact, the showcase was, I believe, the most watched Xbox showcase when they came out and gave their hands-on preview a couple months ago. Now personally, that preview didn't really do a whole lot for me. While I found it to be full of new information which we hadn't already received, I also found it to be rather empty and repeating itself given its time length. So the question remains, can Starfield live up to the expectations it has set for itself, or the expectations that people like Todd Howard and the people at Bethesda have also set for this game? Okay, before we get into the meat and potatoes, we have to talk about this, which is by far Starfield's biggest win, and I don't want to hear any argument about this. Starfield has reinstated Pluto's rightful status as a planet. None of this moon bullshit or whatever NASA tried to tell us it is. Pluto is a planet. Now, many people will argue that when it comes to Bethesda games, ever since really Fallout 3, particularly with Skyrim, these games have been considered as vast as an ocean, but as deep as a puddle, which is where the modders come in. All these games have managed to launch with bug after bug after bug. I mean, Todd Howard himself even acknowledged this. And of course, it's always the modders that come into the rescue, whether it be to fix said bugs for the game or add brand new quest lines and new textures and new weapons and new items to these Bethesda games. Now, I know you can say that about every gaming franchise out there that has modders involved with it, but seriously, the modders for Bethesda games are on a whole other level. These guys save Bethesda games' ass time after time after time, which of course led us into the whole bullshit and drama which came about with the Creation Club. By the way, fuck Bethesda for that Creation Club idea. And it looks like Starfield's going to be no different in that regard, because Starfield modders are already making a community patch. Months ago, they had already come out and they made a little group saying, hey, we're here for the launch of this game because it's a Bethesda game, so it's probably going to be busted at launch, so us modders are stepping up to sort this shit out. There you go. And like we mentioned just before, games being a broken mess is nothing new to Bethesda. Now, I don't want to come across as I'm trashing Bethesda too much. I have put so many hundreds of hours into games like Fallout 3. In fact, I don't even want to know how many hours I played Skyrim on both the PS3 and Xbox 360. Granted, most of that might have been loading times if you remember that game back in the day. And given the scope of this game, it's supposed to be some intergalactic epic. We were promised there was going to be thousands of planets, and well, it looks like majority of them will be empty. 10% of Starfield's planets will feature life in some way. Another way you could word this is 90% of this game is probably going to be empty. And there's a lot of hopium and copium going on out there that they're going to use this 90% empty space to fill it with DLC. And while that certainly is possible, they're basically saying, we're launching this game with jack shit to do in it. Now, the way I interpret this is that they're going to have like 10 or so key planets where most of the story is going to take place. They're going to be filled with big cities, lush environments, thousands of NPCs, and it's going to feel very populated. But outside of that, it's going to be relatively empty. Now, I understand, you are alone in outer space, so there is supposed to be that feeling of loneliness, but this seems like an incredible missed opportunity. There is potential for this to land on a planet, discover some type of life form that only exists on that planet, and then you go and tell your friend about that, and they're trying to track down where that planet is, and maybe that planet doesn't even exist on their playthrough of the game. There's so much potential to fill this universe, because that's what this is, this universe with fresh, exciting, and creative enemies, or even just life forms that can only be counted in specific parts of this universe. Maybe there's 3 or so planets that are close to each other, and they formed some type of empire that runs over those 3 planets, but everything beyond those 3 planets, they don't even know exists. Their options are endless for this type of stuff. And instead, we're being told that only 10% of these planets will feature life in some way. That is a missed opportunity of epic proportions. Now, one thing that Bethesda keeps trying to push on us is the fact that we have the ability to build our own ships and customize them in many different ways. And while that's cool and all, why would players get too attached to their ships if they have nowhere interesting to take their said ships to and anything interesting to discover? Now, I'm not saying this game's going to be completely empty, because I know some people are going to try and twist my words on this. I just feel that a universe that they have created could really benefit from being, I don't know, a full universe. So far, what do we actually know about Starfield? Well, there's a bit of a write-up over here that we can go over. So the setting, the Starfield setting is one of Bethesda's most ambitious. While the studio is no stranger to building massive, open-ended, explorable worlds through the likes of Fallout 4, yeesh, and Elder Scrolls Skyrim, Starfield, however, is set across the cosmos itself. The settled systems, as known in the game, in the area that extends outward from our personal solar system by approximately 50 light years. As for now, how much of this setting will be free to explore, Bethesda has confirmed that Starfield will have more than 100 systems and around 1,000 planets. Now, that sounds fantastic, but once again, I'd like to go back to a previous statement of as wide as an ocean, but as deep as a puddle. And the fact that 90% of this universe is described by Bethesda themselves as being lifeless, well, that says all that, doesn't it? Next up is Starfield's timeline. If you really want to do a deep dive on the Starfield timeline, then you'll be delighted to learn that Bethesda themselves has unleashed almost 300 years of backstory ahead of the game's launch. Now, that's a double-edged sword in my opinion, because on one end, it's cool to have a backstory and have lore, especially in a full universe like this, but on the other hand, I think people would rather have a reason in-game to be excited and want to learn about the lore and then get this type of information. I don't know, maybe I'm just looking a bit too deep into that. In this extensive timeline of events on Starfield's official website, you'll find a section titled The Story So Far. It's here where you'll find the timeline for key in-universe events starting from 2050 all the way up to the year 2352, just 2 years before the campaign setting begins. And that brings us to the story of Starfield. Now, there is leaks and spoilers out there in the wild on the internet. I will not be covering them in this video. Instead, I'm just going to focus on what's presented here. The core of Starfield's story is very much a closely guarded secret, although Bethesda has given out a few details. We know that Starfield takes place in the year 2330, 20 years after two of the largest factions in the settled systems, the United Colonies and the Freestar Collective, engaged in a bloody colony war for territorial control. You'll assume the role of a member of the Constellation, an organization of space explorers trying to navigate what remains of the aftermath. Where you go and who you choose to be by your side is totally up to you. Additionally, Bethesda confirmed that Starfield's main quest will be 20% bigger than Skyrim and Fallout 4. So that's pretty good right there. That's a win in terms of mainline quest size. So what about Starfield's gameplay? While the Starfield gameplay appears to be drawing heavily from other popular science fiction games like Elite Dangerous and No Man's Sky, at its heart it's still a Bethesda RPG. If you've played any of the studio's Fallout or Elder Scrolls games, you'll know what that means. Wide open spaces and settlements to explore, progression systems that reward you for investing time in elements of the game that you enjoy, and overall structure that leverages choice and consequences. Starfield will also include gameplay elements that are new to Bethesda games, such as flying ships in outer space, as well as more considered focus on resource management, crafting and base building, and real-time combat with firearms. Like Bethesda's previous RPGs, you'll be able to switch between a first-person and third-person perspective at will. Now, Bethesda has also teased the Starfield dialogue and persuasion system, which will give you yet another way to shape this adventure in your own. While you can explore and run and gun your way through the game, you can also invest enough XP in obtaining the gift of Gab, with Starfield launching into a turn-based minigame as you try to persuade NPCs around to your position. It also looks to have a lot of common with similar systems seen in other Bethesda games like the legendary Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. Todd Howard has confirmed that Starfield has 4 times as much dialogue as Skyrim, so taking the time to converse with NPCs will be a massive part of the experience. Now, while that sounds great and all, I can't help but think of the last time Todd Howard used a multiplier to advocate for one of the upgrades into an ongoing game.
16 times the detail.
And then of course there is the Starfield ship customization, which we talked about very briefly. And then on top of that, there's crafting and research, which is a whole other thing. There's also going to be backgrounds for your characters, such as how they handle themselves and where they come from and what their upbringing was like. This is what I assume is just going to fall into traits and skill points at the start of the game, and maybe some dialogue options, and maybe even a starting position for the game. And finally, the Starfield engine is confirmed to be the Creation Engine 2. The game engine was engineered alongside Starfield and is designed to be the new standard for the studio moving forward. So while games like Elder Scrolls, Skyrim and Fallout 4 all share the same technology, the Creation Engine 2 has allowed Bethesda to set it up further expansion and evolution in this new generation. So Todd Howard has confirmed that Elder Scrolls 6, which will build upon the company has been able to achieve with the Starfield Creation 2 engine. So there is a lot of positives surrounding Starfield, but I'm just finding it so difficult to look past the fact that 90% of this game is empty and that it is a Bethesda release. And I used to be incredibly hyped whenever there was a new Bethesda game coming out after the first time I played Fallout 3. But with everything going on with current day Bethesda, current day AAA gaming, and some of the things that we have seen and heard about this game, I am leaning slightly more into the negative side of this game. However, this game is going to be on Game Pass, so if you have Game Pass, you can download it and give it a go, which is what I intend to do. And if I end up being wrong and this game is great, well then that's just a win across the board. However, this is modern day Bethesda, so only time will tell.
Online games are hard. They can have some nasty issues. I read on the internet that our games have had a few bugs. I did. I read it on the internet, so it's true. And that sometimes it doesn't just work.